Wisdom with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am your host, Scott Allen, and this is Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. If the topic is leadership, I'm in. I've spent more than 20 years in the field teaching, learning, writing, and questioning. When I'm not working on Phronesis, I travel, delivering keynotes, working with individuals and teams, and helping people from organizations across industries become better leaders. Want to learn more? Visit me at scottjallen.net. Phronesis offers a smart, fast-paced discussion about all things leadership. We explore relevant topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. Listen Notes lists Phronesis in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. Phronesis is the official podcast of the International Leadership Association. ILA brings together those who teach, study, and develop leadership, advancing leadership knowledge and practice for a better world. Learn more at ila-net.org. Finally, if you enjoy Phronesis, please subscribe to stay current on our weekly episodes. If you find an episode that resonates, please share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you want more content, subscribe to my newsletter, The Leader's Edge. The link is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. And now, here's today's show. Okay, everyone, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for checking in. I have a returning guest today. Super excited for this conversation, Keith Eigel. And he and Carl Kunert were on probably episode 99, something like that. And so Carl and I had done an episode a few months back, and I thought, I wonder what Keith is thinking about. So, sir, no real agenda today, but you are an individual I like to follow. I'm interested in knowing what you're seeing, what you're thinking about. And so let's keep it open. Thank you for coming back. Maybe a little bit about you for listeners so that they have that context.
First of all, it's just an honor to be with you. I mentioned this before we got this started, and just so impressed and grateful for the work that you do. It keeps me involved in a lot of the things that are latest thinking, and I so appreciate that. We are, I think what dominates my thinking right now the most is just how do we need to be rethinking the way we are growing people. We've had our models that we've had success with. I think I did not take an academic route out of graduate school, really wanted to apply what we were doing. And it's crazy that I'm in my 30th year this year, personally interacted with probably 3,000 leaders, maybe more north of that, over that period of time, been involved in their development. We're with people for a long stretch of time when we're with them. And it's really, how do we keep pushing the kind of development that matters further and further down in organizations to get people earlier in their careers? That's when they're so, for me, from my perspective, it's when they're so ready to develop. They're so ready to grow. Not saying we don't grow when we get older, but the work is different.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it's harder because there's more risk. I think that's what I've been thinking about the most lately, is just how do we keep pushing this down in a way that really meets people where they are?
So what are some experiments you've been running? What are some things you've been, again, I think you have done work with individuals for 30 plus years, written an incredible, I have it right here, the map. And so maybe we'll get there, written on the topic of how do we help people develop? How do we help individuals grow? What are some of the more recent experiments you've been running? How are you thinking about doing that work? What I'm so interested in also is just how we scale that. I'm sure that's something that you're thinking about. I asked 7 things there, sorry. What experiments are you running?
Maybe, Scott, to create just a little bit of context, the model that Carl and I really developed this together very early on. In 1996, we ran our first group with the Food Science and Technology faculty at the University of Georgia. And we learned a lot. We did a lot of stuff wrong. We had some great clients that stuck with us during these early years of trying to figure out, how do we not just teach leadership skills? That's really not our thing. And by the way, that is getting so accessible now with video and with YouTube, and it's always been there with books, but there are ways to really get into skill development very efficiently, I think.
Yeah.
The harder work has always been, how do we keep maturing people in ways that lead to greater and greater effectiveness, greater life satisfaction, more well-being, all these things. And so often that gets talked about. We talked about it a lot as the vertical journey. More and more, I'm just talking about it as developmental maturity. To contextualize this a little bit, the methods that we developed to try and push this down in organizations were scaling the number of people that we were in front of at a time, but always breaking them into small groups, 5 people usually, but sometimes it was 6, sometimes it's 4, depending on the group size. And really teaching this group how to have conversations together, right, in a way that begins to challenge their meaning making. How do we get them to commit to bumping up against really small amounts of worry, fear, and resistance? One of the favorite people that you introduced me to through your podcast is John Wergen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And oh my gosh, just the idea of constructive disorientation is it's got to come in small doses or else it becomes overwhelming. And groups really do a great job self-regulating. And so there's a little bit of a, like, getting my ego out of the way, that I'm the guy in front of the group teaching all of these amazing things that are going to move you in a direction, and all of the beauty of what happened in the conversations with 5 people. I think one of the things that I've been fascinated with ever since graduate school, and ever since Bob Keegan's book, The Evolving Self, literally changed my life, the course of my life. It was one of those rare things that you read that just hits you at the right time and everything is different after that, is that my passion was really how do we make this accessible to people who don't have the same tolerance I have to sit in that
And read Evolving Self.
intellectual, theoretical space, and yet there's so much practicality. Jonathan Reams, another one of your favorite guests, and he wrote a blurb for us in the map. Another one of these guys that just loves the theory and how can we apply it and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like if we've gotten good at something over 30 years of trying, it's been trying to put this in everyday language. In some cases, for people who may not even have gone to college or finished college, but they now find themselves in their mid-30s or their early 40s, and they're managing a team of people. And it was interesting. I've been talking about leadership as just having influence with others in a direction on purpose for 25 years at least. And I went back and re-listened to Wergen's podcast a few days ago, and he defines it the same way. So I thought, oh my gosh, I'm on solid ground then. That was really good. How do we play a role in people continuing to grow? Because there are so many things in our world that want to keep us in this kind of level 3, socialized, outside in kind of space.
Yes.
And we spend all of our time trying to figure out how to maintain the status quo. And yet the developmental disruption is what leads to growth. And so life is going to throw everybody randomly and predictably at the same time things that they can no longer avoid. And for most people, that's going to grow them to some degree. But one of the things I like to say is I don't want my growth to be determined by the whims of circumstance. I want to have some role in that. I want to have some voice, some proactivity in that. And I think anybody who's listening to this podcast, listening to your podcast regularly, gets that. They're trying to be proactive in their own growth. And so what it takes is just a constant bumping up against the status quo. But then how do you process that? And that's where I think the being in conversation, Wergen even points out that doing it in community with others. And Ellen Van Velser and her colleagues years ago at CCL really looked at the importance of developmental relationships. And that the reality is we just grow faster when we do it reciprocally, especially, but in community with others.
Yep. Don't
try and process it all on our own. And you talk a lot about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a fun, fascinating conversation. How do we design learning experiences that involve interventions. And again, Wergen's book is just incredible for that, whether it's he was my dissertation advisor. And so, for instance, we went to the Museum of Tolerance in LA at a residency, and I'll never forget that experience. I can't tell you what happened in a number of the residencies, conversations we had, but this experience and then the conversation after that, it was just absolutely impactful. Behind me, there's a book by a gentleman named Fred Shuttlesworth, a key figure in the civil rights movement and in Birmingham. And Fred came in and spoke to us. We read the book, we talked about it, and then he came in and he spoke. So I love the instructional design, the adult learning. And then what I love about your work and Carl's work is that you have been, okay, how do we create spaces? We could call it vertical development. We could call it maturity.
And do you know, haven't we all recognized that in the people that we've admired the most, the people that were easiest for us to follow?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what connected with me so strongly about Keegan is everybody that I really admired in my life, he was explaining in a theory of adult development that we all just didn't get our adult card and we're now all grown-ups, that we keep growing as grown-ups, and that when we're intentional about it, we can accelerate that growth. We've been trying to measure this for the last, I don't know, maybe 9 years. And listen, this is sloppy research, but it's beyond the place of being anecdotal right now because the numbers are too big. So we've got about 700 or so people that we have spent 6 months with on a 6-week interval, but full days over that 6 month. And vertical development theoretically underpins all of the work that we're doing. And we're making that very plain to them. We're starting with the map, like how do we grow, and putting that into words that hopefully they can really understand and integrate and see in their own journey to that point. And when they see that, they begin to buy into the more, here's what the opportunity is left in front of me. And an understanding that this takes years, not weeks, right? That the lens changing kind of experiences take place over time with perseverance, but that we can accelerate it. And we ask people to go back and think of where they were when they came into the program before they understood the theory of developmental maturity. We talk about all the things that we've put in front of them to challenge their current understanding and the ways that they've been able to process this in the groups that they've been a part of and how they're learning to coach each other in those times. And then we ask them, where do they feel like they are now in the journey? And it is amazing, within a few tenths of a point of each other, group after group, average after average, they are seeing almost a full half of developmental stage, usually from the mid to low threes, like 3.4, 3.3 in that range, up to seeing themselves as more fully 4 over this 6-month time stress. If you put that in the normal course of development, that's a decade of growth.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of just recency effect. There's a lot of things that complicate this data, but one of the things that we've noticed is that when we officially, using subject-object interview methodology, when we officially measure somebody to the best of our ability, that when someone understands the developmental theory and sits with it for 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 20 weeks, whatever it is, that they are usually accurate at assessing where they are within 1/5 of a developmental stage. Even if we say they were a fifth wrong and a fifth wrong on the way in and a fifth wrong on the way out, they're still seeing movement that is significant, right? What we're seeing is that we can do things that actually put people in a place where they are seeing themselves, others, and the world in a way that is more developmentally mature than they did when we first started working with them. And I remember this being a part of the podcast that Carl and I were on together around the book, but it's the hard stuff that grows us. And so how do we find the right hard stuff
Yes.
we can pull out of the drawer or pull out from under the carpet that we've swept it under, that we've been ignoring, that we have been doing everything that we can do to try and maintain the status quo, to try and just make it all okay. And do you know what, Scott? I'm going to be 64 this year. I'm still sweeping stuff under the rug. It's so much easier, right? It's just, and yet it's not easier. It actually makes life more complicated if I leave it under there for too long. So it's like, how do I pull the right stuff out? How do I pull anything out enough to just start thinking about how could I bump into my own worry, fear, and resistance, which is the reason that I've swept it under the rug? How do I bump into that worry, fear, and resistance in a way that allows me to go, this is very Keegan-esque. This is very back to how the way we talk. It's 4 columns kind of work that we've redesigned to make maybe a little more tangible from our perspective. But it's like, what could I do that I've been reluctant to do? What am I afraid is going to happen if I do that? Then we get into, so what do I do to protect myself from that fear? And what's that tell me that my current set of values around my status quo, what are these things, which are a lot of times safety, security, being liked? For people who are more self-authored, more level 4, a lot of defending their own dogma and getting increasingly dogmatic in the way that they do that. And I like to talk a lot in front of groups, especially because it loosens people up about, do they know any cranky old people? Because that's what happens if we stay stuck. Yeah. But the pull to maintain the status quo is a real thing. And so how do we start to experiment really small steps with bumping up against the worry, fear, and resistance that keeps us from trying the thing that we've been reluctant to try? And so what we've been trying to do is just build that into platforms using the technology and the ways that people are learning now, but not allowing them to do that non-face-to-face, even if it's over Zoom, but in person is even better to some degree, to start to share with people at the degree that they are ready to share. We don't force advanced kind of vulnerability. We let the vulnerability start where they need it to start. But even telling you about the hardest thing that I did last weekend, or my favorite thing last weekend, I'm sharing something of myself that we don't normally share at work. And so even if that's where they're starting, we push them with the curriculum to share more and more, to start to share things from a personality report, or start to share things about feedback they've gotten from other people, or eventually start talking about their worry, fear, and resistance. And man, these groups, they self-regulate in a way that tends to accelerate growth.
You're experimenting, and I love that. And I have so much respect for that, because I've said for a long time, I've said it on the podcast, it's a thought experiment, but if we started with leader development at completely the wrong spot, teaching you about transformational leadership and situational leadership and giving you theories about leadership, and how do we, to your point on youth, I had some K-12 folks on in recent times, and it's an episode that was just really a lot of fun. How do we build some habits of mind, whether that's critical reflection? How do you build the habit of metacognition? How do I create awareness in myself of when I'm feeling worry, fear, and resistance? Can I create that habit of mind? Can I intentionally build a community around me of people that I can turn to when I catch that I have worry, fear, and resistance? And for me, that's my wife on a walk. That's Dr. Phil, who I see for a number of years now. I've built that team, but whether it's dialectical thinking, whether it's metacognition, habits of mind that facilitate that ongoing critical reflection so that we do mature. And I love how you're thinking about it, that if we're doing some of that work proactively, when the hard stuff does arrive, we are better. It's almost like you have a suit of armor. When some of the softer stuff arrives, we have a suit of armor. I had a guest on, and she said, her role is helping leaders be performance ready. Well, I think a lot of the leaders that I come across, what they're trying to do is Olympian. It's Herculean, what some of them are navigating, and they're not given the armor. They're not given the tools to be successful navigating some of that. They're told a session about situational leadership, but that doesn't matter if I'm agitated and I'm not prepared to withstand the stress and to withstand some of that work, right?
Yeah, I've gotten so many notes and emails from people over the years that when we learn how to grow in the really small challenges, we start to build a developmental fitness that when the big stuff hits, I use this analogy and it's dumb. If a couch potato goes out for his annual game of flag football with his buddies, Monday he is going to be sore, maybe injured, and not 1 ounce stronger than he was the week before.
Yeah.
But if you take someone who works out a couple of times a week with intentionality and they go out and play in that same game, it's actually adding to their strength. The bigger event is actually adding to their strength. And developmentally, what I've heard is that it is leaning into the small, doable stuff that made the loss of a loved one or losing their job or having difficulty with a child or in a relationship. It's what is this supposed to be teaching me? There's almost a preparedness, and I think that's what you're getting at.
I love that phrasing, developmental fitness. This is a silly example. I don't know if it aligns with where you're going, but you can let me know if it does or not. But for a time, traveling is my greatest educator. And how I've been thinking about travel in recent times is that when, not if, all of these things go haywire with the airplane, the person next to me that is watching their karate movie on full volume in the airport terminal with their feet up and shoes off, clicking their toenails at the same time, whatever it is that they're doing, I now have reframed it as, okay, like my response at this point is breathe. Just it's almost like I've almost gotten, and when the flight is delayed, breathe. Now, that doesn't mean I'm successful every time. I had a 9-hour intensive 2-hour flight that turned into a 9-hour on the plane experience where it was the next level training that I'd walked into the black belt experience, the simulation. But it's reframing these little things and approaching them with a different mindset, I think, that again, to your point, can train us for when now with my children, I can more easily go right into the breathing when I feel myself getting, and I can say, okay, you all, I'm at 3 out of 10. Just wanted you to know I'm at a 3. Okay, it's a 5. Just saying.
Yeah.
As Keegan, back to him, the curriculum of life, if we can, because I think, and what I love about what you're doing is we're putting people into dialogue and conversation that is building that muscle, developing that developmental fitness that is preparing them. Again, back to, can I notice when I'm experiencing worry, fear, or resistance? Just even that pause and that noticing.
Yeah.
That's growth. That's incredible growth for many.
Yeah. Almost like a mindful practice, right? Where you're trying to stay present to the things and name those things in a way. Keegan got us on this bandwagon a million years ago, but it's the thing I think that comes easiest to all of us is complaining or being frustrated. The same thing, right? And it's like pain in the human body. Try not to feel pain. If somebody stabs you in the hand with a pencil, you can't not feel the pain. But what the pain is telling you physically is it's telling you there's something wrong here. And when we think about complaining, which is so easy, a lot of times we try and stuff it off to the side, but we know when we're frustrated. I think if we just get good at embracing our complaints, that puts us on the journey understanding what matters to us that's not being realized right now. And then that sets us on the journey of, I could do something about this, but I've been reluctant to do it. And why have I been reluctant? Because of the worry, fear, resistance. And And again, this is a lot, very four columnsy if people are familiar with that. I think the thing that getting good at asking yourself these questions when you're in the presence of mind to do it.
Yes.
Then when you do get in a 9-hour airport situation.
No, airplane. I was on the plane.
You
for
were
9
on the
hours.
plane for
2 hours.
9.
But it was so interesting also then, and it's not to say that I was perfect in this moment. I'm texting my wife and letting her know and giving her updates, but, and this is such a silly example, listeners, I understand, but you have to also, as I'm observing how other people are reacting, people are ordering more drinks. Some people are just on their phone loudly just complaining to people. Some people are being jerks to the stewardess who has no control over the situation whatsoever. And so it was just, you begin to open your eyes to, okay, my mind is here. What can I control and how can I navigate this as effectively as possible? And how are other people responding, which is probably not serving them well, probably making the situation worse.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would complain about the airport and the airline and all of this. And now I just look at it as, okay, after that 9-hour flight, we landed, no doubt, Keith, and there was no gate attendant to like let us into the. And I'm like,
beautiful
okay,
finish to the story, right?
Another deep breath, slow down. It's probably going to be about 20 minutes.
Yeah. Isn't it funny the way that leads us, if we're mindful, eventually that experience can shape your authorship of the kind of person that you want to be and the kind of person you want to be in front of others and what's the influence that you want to have on them. And if I start owning my understanding and maturity, in a funny way, what you were talking about is there were more mature and less mature responses. But if I'm trying to own my maturity in that situation, does that start to, without me even evangelizing it in some way, does it start to change some of the people around me? What's the story I want to tell? That always demands an inside out answer. And if that changes our lens in one little way, we've taken a step on the vertical journey.
And just go to, my son and I also had an experience at O'Hare in January or December. And that was another one of those experiences. And so what am I now modeling for my son? Am I ordering 4 more drinks and getting drunk on the airplane? Am I bitching and complaining? Am I having a temper tantrum? Or am I looking at him and saying, this is the place where I practice patience. I've entered a class I didn't know I was going to tonight.
Yeah.
Class is in session. So
class is in session. Yeah.
And it does have a very real impact. I think at home, with our partners, with loved ones, and again, by no means have I arrived. I've just come to the conclusion that so again, the curriculum of life, there's all these opportunities to practice if we have that mindset and if we see through that lens, right?
Yeah. You've made me realize that I maybe don't talk about, we've talked about when people ask me what I do, I say I help grownups keep growing in the context of leadership. But I think the more important thing is that we're helping people see what it takes to grow. Not just coaching, holding accountable, creating theory, space, and structure for them to process whatever's going on right now, but that this skill set of growing vertically becomes life-changing in ways where a bad airport experience will maybe provide you one of the most profound teaching experiences with your child that may not show up for them for a couple of years, but they're like, man, I remember that time in the airport when dad X, Y, and Z did, and everybody else around us was going crazy. And that's leadership, man. That's leadership. That's having influence with someone in a direction on purpose.
Yes. And again, Scott is not perfect and has not arrived, but
none of us have. And that's the beauty of this. And the further along the journey we get, I think the more we realize how much there is to go.
And this whole thing around developmental fitness, I don't know how well you have that developed out, but at least where my mind goes, what are the different exercises we can engage in that produce that fitness, that facilitate that fitness, that facilitate the growth. Another silly example is I got an Aura ring. And
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you have a Whoop or an Aura ring or an Apple Watch, but it has, yeah, so much data. And that in and of itself also has helped me. It's shifted my behavior, helped me prioritize sleep in a little bit of a different way. And so that has had an impact. And it's an example of technology having an impact of how do I better prioritize recovery so I am the best version of myself? Because according to the data, yesterday was a big day. What am I doing now? And so again, that is a piece, I think, of developmental fitness of I could drive harder or I can recover and be the best version of myself. And I don't know, I love that conversation of what are these little interventions that can help us. It's almost like a gym. You walk around and there's a bunch of different tools that help you build strength in different ways. It's cool.
No, I love it. That's what we've tried to do for the last 30 years is I was thinking, obviously, because I knew we were going to have this conversation today about the way your podcast has influenced my growth in ways. And we've got these different points of application to build developmental strength. We've got these circumstantial things that are going on around us all the time. Some of those are at work, some of those are at home. And those are usually the things we complain about, right? Yeah. And then if we deal with that complaint the right way, it can
like a keto. We shift the energy.
We do. All of a sudden, we're thinking about, oh, now I really understand what I value better. What could I do to more fully realize that thing that I value? What do I worry, fear, and resist? How am I protecting myself? If we get into that pattern, we can do it on almost anything that's bugging us. But another way we grow is challenging our belief system, what we hold to be true about the way the world works, about the way we work, about all of these things. And that's where technology, oh my gosh, it's just opened doors to the things that we can see. Even your Aura ring is helping you to challenge the way the lens that you had saw yourself in the midst of the way you were taking care of yourself.
Yes. In
a way, but if you realize this is all part of this developmental process of maybe I wish I had said this clearer early in the podcast. Developmental maturity, vertical development is about challenging the lens that we see the world through, because you have a lens right now, I have a lens right now. This conversation may make the lens that we have tomorrow slightly different in a way, and if it has, that's vertical growth. Yeah. And we have grown, but if the more we can understand that challenge is our friend, that I just love Morgan's. I think he says it's constructive disorientation, right? Constructive disorientation. I think that's right. And then it's all around us. So when my wife asks me to do something, and I'm thinking, that's not what I feel like doing right now. I've got an opportunity in that moment to think about why. Yes. What is it about the way I'm built right now, the way I'm seeing the world right now? What is it? And when I'm at my best, I'm doing that, not on a daily basis, but on a more regular basis than not. And when I'm in my own little self-protective, keep my status quo, here's what I want to do.
My needs, like in the moment.
And you can have your needs from any level on the journey. It becomes a little more likely that you more naturally orient toward others at level 5, but up until then. And so we didn't know what this conversation was going to be about, and it turns out to be that it's all around us all the time.
I'm gonna title the episode that. For a while, I was thinking worry, fear, and resistance, but I like that. It has a everywhere all at once.
Yeah.
Vibe. Yeah. What was that Academy film?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think you may have just said it, but as we begin to wind down the conversation, what's the practical wisdom for you here?
Don't become a complainer. Nobody likes complainers, but learn to embrace your complaint, because to me, it all starts there. It is the thing that we can't help not feel. There are a lot of double negatives in that, but I think I got it right. We can't not feel that. We can't not feel that pain. And if everything were great, we wouldn't be feeling any pain. So it's like wherever our lens is, wherever we are on this beautiful journey, and all the beautiful places on the journey, even the middle school places on the journey are beautiful. when you're in middle school. It's a problem if you're 35 and you're still in middle school. Our pain meets us where we are, and then it opens the door. And by the way, if we did this with every complaint and every frustration, I think we'd need to be locked up. We go crazy. But the idea of thinking, what have I leaned into this week? Right? What have I thought through? What have I talked about with someone else? What have I tried to process to see what I could be doing differently and why I'm scared to do it differently? Or if not scared, at least resistant. I think that's the practical wisdom from my perspective.
It's there. It's right in front of us a lot of the time. And I love what you just said. It can't be everything. That'll make us go crazy. But what are some of those important things that we can lean into a little bit, get curious, slow down, question, and begin to reframe or at least explore, right?
Yeah.
Thinking partners. So.
If there's one other little thing, Scott, and we started here a little bit, don't go it alone. Don't go it alone. There is great value in reflection, journaling, thinking through privately, walks. I try and engage in all of those behaviors. But because of this conversation, I thought of things and had to say things that I wouldn't have had to say if we weren't trying to talk about something.
The wisdom of Wergen, that it has to be with others. And I don't think it has to be all the time. I Thomas Hill in that episode talked about how he reflects and he writes. That's great. What is it for you? And I think with others some of the time, I think it's a critical part of the learning.
Yeah, it's not to the exception of processing on your own, but it is. I mean, the research on all that is so. We don't even talk about it. I don't even know who's researching it now, if anybody, but because the research seems so complete back in the 90s when it was like being in developmental relationships accelerates development.
Sir, I appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
Love the conversation, and we'll do it again. I really hope so. Hopefully it's not going to take another 200 episodes. So maybe we'll get
love that.
Wergen on together and we could explore. Who knows?
Oh, what an honor that would be to just be in conversation with him.
Okay. For listeners, there's some links in the show notes. Please check those out. And you know what, Keith, we'll do it again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay. Be well. You have just finished another episode of Practical Wisdom for Leaders with Scott Allen. To contact me, visit scottjallen.net or send me a note at scott@scottjallen.net. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And now here's my daughter, Emily, with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.